know, when we were kids, I guess the only thing we knew about Real Cowboys
Dick Lemoine.
were the movies we saw at the Joy Theater. And one of the things that always struck me is, you know, us Cajuns, we'll take 20 words to say something that we could have said in maybe 5 or 10. Is Mr. Reeves, when you asked him a question, he was very brief. He might say, yep, nope. And when he had something to tell you, he thought about it before he said it. And he could probably say something in 5 words that it took us 20 or 30 to say. And he embodied what we saw in those movies. You know, he was the real cowboy. I never heard him complain about anything. And I think about, he lived in what appeared to be an old garage with corrugated tin, and it didn't even have a front door. It had a barn door, you know, a big wide door that he would open slightly to go in. And as I recall, I don't remember it having a floor. He might have had a few wooden pallets where he had his bedding and stuff. I suspect he kept, I never saw any reading material. I'm not sure about this, but I suspect he kept a Bible next to his bed. And you know, I guess we weren't really thoughtful. But I assume that he lived with a lot less than most of us grew up with. And I can see him on that horse, kind of stooped over his shoulders, as most cowboys do, would roll forward, and that little hat, the only hat I'd ever seen like that was a picture of Billy the Kid. It looked, you know, and it was so unique. And there were about 30 of us kids who had horses. Most of the streets were gravel in Cottonport. The highways were gravel. And we, every Saturday, Merle was one of us who did Udi, Gano, Little Max. A lot of kids had horses. And our recreation on Saturdays was to go out and ride and build palmetto huts in the woods and play tricks on each other and try to see who you could get bucked off a horse. And when we had a problem or an illness with cattle or horses, I don't remember there being any veterinarians. Besides Taft Dupree, our ag teacher, you called Mr. Reeves or Spraw, Mr. Milton Capel, and they came over and they had remedies we had never heard of. Merle mentioned one today, motor oil and sulfur to treat wounds. And if you had fistulas or screwworms, they had ways of popping them out of the back of a cow with a bottle. And they knew, I once heard them talk about a cow getting stuck. They'd try to pull out with a horse. I don't know if Daddy told me or what. But he mentioned they had doubled up a rope and took a small log and started twisting the rope, and it probably took 2 or 3 hours. I think it might have been on a canal back Max Merrick's pasture near Ploshyville. They pulled that old frame of cow out of that mud by twisting that rope, and they just did so many unique things like that. And Max mentioned him shoeing horses. Well, he had one of those common little charcoal furnaces that you heat horseshoes in with a little blower you cranked. But he evidently couldn't afford an anvil. and he would heat those shoes, and then he would walk out to the railroad track, and that's what he used for an handle. And he would beat those shoes into the shape he wanted on the track, and he would stand there and shoe those horses. You'd hold a rope, and he'd get that foot between his leg, and neither one of those guys were ever afraid. I know we used to go round up Bramers at Uncle Max's, and they'd tell us, boy, you better be able to turn that horse if one of those cows comes at you. But they were never afraid. And I don't recall Mr. Reeves dying, and I was wondering why. And I noticed he died on April 23rd, 1969. Well, I was supposed to my wife and I were supposed to be married on April 19th of that year. And she was going to pick up a wedding dress on the 18th, and she hit a train and was hospitalized for 3 weeks and nearly died. And I guess that's why I didn't even realize he had passed away then.
Hey, Doge, do you remember, it just hit me, his goal in life was to jump out of an airplane on a horse, parachute down. He was going to be the first man to ever do that. You remember that story?
Well, I never heard him mention it, but I suspect he would. David Lemoine probably aided it in the plan. I would think so. But I just want to say how lucky we were to have that kind of person, because you know what we saw in the movies and what we read wasn't quite believable about how tough these guys were who lived on the ranges of Texas and New Mexico and Colorado. And when we saw it in person, never a complaint, never whining, never hearing a person feel sorry for himself, and bearing the kind of life he did with such dignity, you know, what a great lesson for all of us.
Thanks, Dick.
Empty saddles in the old corral. Where do you ride tonight?